Can I Not Marry audio web novel chapter 30. Beat your little head. Who told you to ignore me? An auspicious night. A rich wife sat around the table playing mahjong. Even in a small town a husband was scolding his wife, calling her a useless abassin. Roughly around this time countless of people would be nibbling on melon seeds as they sat in front of the TV. Except for Du Lacey, who has been upgraded as the legitimate wife of the president. However, she was sitting on the bed with her legs crossed, beating the petty person, too. The props for beating the petty person was a bear doll and a pair of slippers was on the bed. Beat your little head. Who told you to ignore me? Du Lacey hit down once. Recall this morning's incident from the hotel. From that moment on, the president ignored her, pretending that he didn't know who she was like and completely discarding how he treated her last night. Sure enough, what Zhu Yaofei said right. Rich men are unreliable. Beat your petty hands. Who let you embrace your cousin? Even if the president ignored her, he actually went as far as to carry the wicked Princess Hao, putting on a good cousin show, while his attitude towards her was entirely different. Making the little devil pleased with herself, her tail almost ascended to the sky, staring at Du Lacey as if she's the third party in this situation. You're the third party, your entire family is the third party. Du Lacey's heart wanted to cry out, so she ruthlessly beat the slippers on the bear's belly. Bear your petty belly, who told you to eat? Just bringing up this topic made her angry. Last night, she also somehow coordinated with the strenuous exercise. Unexpectedly, the president didn't even place any food into her bowl, letting Princess Hao eat most of the vegetables, telling her it's good nutritional supplements. Causing Du Lacey, who sat beside them seeing such a scene, to lose her appetite. She didn't even finish eating and angrily ran upstairs. To encounter such an abominable man, this really filled her with gas. Beat your petty feet. Who told you not to run after me? After she furiously threw the chopsticks on the table, she dashed upstairs and closed the door loudly. The president still failed to run after her. He was still downstairs laughing and joking with Princess Hao as they ate. Heaven, earth, even if the president is using that Huli Jing to make her angry, why did he have to choose a silly little 7 or 8-year-old Lolita as her opponent? One of the most extravagant thing is she hasn't even weaned off milk bottles yet. Unexpectedly, this made her suffer a crushing defeat. Grievous. Thereupon, Du Lacey thought of Da Zhou from the gold counters. Even though it's a small mound, but at least there is a place for you. Compared to your husband having mistresses, lying inside the luxurious tomb is better than having your body left in the wilderness. Now that she was in this state, being left in the wilderness isn't far off either. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She couldn't help but use all her lifetime's energy to beating until her hand almost cramped up. She only stopped when she heard a helpless voice, "You still haven't hit enough." She beating with too much excitement that she didn't even realize when Lian Jun opened the door and came in, standing behind her. She can only say that once one is psychologically distorted, it is easy for them to enter the realm of self-enclosed metamorphosis. For a moment, Du Lacey was surprised. When did you come in? When you were beating my petty hands. Quote ellipsis quote. Why aren't you continuing? Lian Jun asked while randomly sitting next to her on the bed. Du Lacey obviously felt the side of the bed sink down. Her mood unconsciously became nervous. Despite her nervousness, her belly full of anger did not diminish. The dyed duck was stubborn and reluctant to admit her mistakes and insisted, "I didn't tell you to sit down, will you get out?" Lian Jun smiled without a word. He only used a faint smile to stare at her, making one feel nervous. Go out to accompany your cousin. Don't pestle here, it is improper for men and women to touch each other. Du Lacey said as she stretched out her hands to push him, forming her hands into a fist. First of all, this house is mine. If I want to sit here I can. Second of all, I have asked Old Fang to send Princess back. And third of all, speaking up to this point, Lian Jun didn't say any more. He only used his shining eyes to stare at Du Lacey. The strength of his hold deepened, clutching her entire hand into his. The ambiguity of this action made Du Lacey recall the sweet colorful stimulate the picture of last night. She hastily tried to pull her hand back, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't pull them back. At this time, her brain's romantic cells began to move again. If the president to use a little bit of strength, she would definitely have stumbled into his arms. At that time, if she wanted to break off, it almost prohibitively would be very difficult. The president clearly wanted to eat her tofu a second time, however her anger have not diminished today. How can she let the president take advantage of her? So she simply diverted the subject. You said, you have sent Princess Hao home. That's right. Lian Jun nodded. He shifted slightly to the side, while randomly crossing his right leg over the left, still holding onto her hands. Xiao Zhu Zheng. No. Wasn't the little princess supposed to stay here for a period of time? That's right, but I didn't agree to that. At this time, Du Lacey was curious enough to sit up, however her hands were still on too tightly by the president, so she froze and asked, why? Didn't the president really adore this cousin of his? Those particularly tender glazes he used while staring at her, one could tell how much he doted her. I thought you don't like her. Ah. Du Lacey was stunned and immediately responded by nodding. Where? Sure enough, her mood couldn't escape the president's piercing eyes. She now really thought that she was the white-bone demon. If you don't hate her, then you are eating her vinegar. Being questioned, Du Lacey's face became increasingly warm. She hung her head and sounded like a mosquito. You're talking nonsense. Okay. She admitted that she was slightly jealous, but a large part of her emotional outbreak was because of the president's abominable attitude. Which person can casually swallow this down and not even make a sound? An endless supply of body temperature flowed her clenched hands. It made her arm feel very hot. This unspeakable feeling, she didn't know whether she was more angry or delighted. Seeing her like this, the initial anger Lian Jun had completed disappeared. He also knows that this girl would not said anything if it wasn't for Princess Hao pushing her to the edge and causing her to swear those oaths. However, as soon as he saw her tacitly approve, his heart felt slightly uncomfortable. He only just want to briefly scare her to let her know what she can say and what she can't. But once he saw the expression Princess Hao had on her face the entire day, she appeared to suffer from injustice on the verge of tears. His heart couldn't bear seeing her like this, so decided to leave her stay. He was not soft-hearted. After all, who stay and who should not leave, he has a very clear idea in his heart. Lian Jun secretly sighed. He was quite helpless. Just when he wanted to say something, Du Lacey was one step ahead of him and raised her head. I'm hungry. Since the knot within her heart is untied, in the belly of a gas naturally diminished. And since there's no gas, she immediately felt hungry. It's all thanks to the president. If it wasn't because of him, she wouldn't have been so angry that she couldn't even finish her dinner. Get up. I asked Auntie Wu to make you some chicken soup. This Chinese Angelica chicken soup that Auntie Wu made was very delicious. In succession, Du Lacey drank 3 bowls. She also felt boundless. Lian Jun only silently watched on the side. Once she ate until she was full. When Du Lacey touched her full belly, she just realized she has selfishly eaten it all. Forgetting the president, she felt that she was too rude, so happily smiled and asked, would you like a bowl? It tastes very good. Lian Jun shook his head. You eat a little more. I'm full. Du Lacey patted her belly, and it was round. Have some more. This soup enriches the blood. Enriches the blood. Du Lacey recalled last night and her face heated up. At this time, Lian Jun already moved and gave her a bowl of soup, placed in front of her. Eat more, you're too skinny. Thin. Du Lacey looked down at her tiny limbs. Although she was small-boned, but there's still meat there, especially since she married the president. The food has increased, her body weight has also increased significantly. No, it's not thin. You look at my arms, it's all flesh. Du Lacey raised up her arm. You're thin. Lian Jun's finger poked her arm and shook his head. Embracing it feels uncomfortable. Ka-cha. Someone felt fragmentation. Forget it. She better just drink her chicken soup. 1 glope, 2 glope. She really finished the bowl of soup. I want to go to the toilet. Du Lacey said, holding her stomach. Just as she wanted to rush to the toilet, she was too anxious and one of her slippers came off, causing her to incidentally also push Old Yu's beloved Falankai vase. Oh, my vase. Old Yu stood in the dark corner weeping bitterly. Shush. Auntie Wu gestured him be quiet as she whispered, you don't want your life. If young master were to discover we've been secretly peeking, even if death unavoidable, our wages will be deducted. Old Yu hurriedly covered his mouth, pitifully nodded his head. Since he reported the couple's progress to the old madam, she was delighted. He thought since the two of them finally decided to settle down, she no longer ordered others to spy on them. However, he didn't expect once the old madam was happy, it'll ignite her desire to be noisy. She simply wanted to know the couple's intimate details. Poor housekeeper Yu was an almost 60-year-old man. Auntie Wu was also well over 50. The two old pair secretly hid in the dark to witness their young master's affectionate actions. It was really embarrassing. In the dark, poor old Yu's face was covered in snot and tears while Lian Jun has stood up from his chair and walked toward the restroom. Arriving at the door entrance, Du Lacey came out with a pale white face. Lian Jun took advantage of the opportunity and pressed her up against the wall. The sudden movement shocked Du Lacey. You, what are you doing? No, it can't be. Surely that sentence can't be true. The last meal before beheaded. Are you full? Lian Jun raised his eyebrows and asked. Indeed, as expected, he wanted to feed her then eat her. Du Lacey suddenly felt a bit like a pig, happy to be kept by a man, the fed until she's plump, only to discover her master wanted to eat her. No. She desperately shook her head. Within Lian Jun's arms, he stretched out his fingers to lift her chin up. From now on, do you still dare to say that words? What? What words? She was slightly nervous and ignorant. Well. Lian Jun narrowed his eyes. Do not dare. Do not dare. Du Lacey quickly continuously shook her head. And if you were to speak such words again? If I was to say them again? Du Lacey's heart was anxious. Her mouth spoke quickly and blurted out the following sentence. If I was to say them again, then the son I give birth to will have no asshole. Lian Jun's face suddenly darkened. He raised his hand. You still dare to use my son to swear an oath? Be careful of your little ass. Do not dare. Do not dare. Scold. Scold your head. A long time ago she said these a dozen of times. No. Wait. What is your son? I obviously said it was my son. Whoops. What is all this? Du Lacey was pondering the issues regarding whose son it is when the president suddenly grabbed her hand and ran upstairs. What? What are you doing? Go back to the room, and make a son. When Du Lacey finally reacted, her face suddenly turned red. She hurriedly retreated a few steps and refused to go. No, I'm not going. Why? A shadow overcast Lian Jun's face. Du Lacey hesitated before saying, just now, one of my relatives came to see me. Lian Jun appeared dissatisfied. Which relative? She raised her head and looked at him awkwardly. My auntie. Basically Du Lacey's period came.